Hi, it's David here. Hello, it's David here. Welcome. So today I want to talk a little bit about conflict versus tension. Conflict versus tension. So what do we mean by these? And of course, what we're looking at here is the building of a story, whether it's a novel or a short story or anything like that. We need to have both conflict and tension within the story, or else there is no story. So what I mean by this is, and if you've taken any kind of workshop with me, you know I tend to harp on this quite a bit, that if there is no tension in the story, then there is no story. So we're always looking for ways to build the tension in a story. But what's the difference between conflict and tension? Because some people will use those terms interchangeably. So conflict is what does happen in the story, and tension is what could happen. And it's the second one, it's the tension that's super important. So conflict, yes, we're going to have Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader duking it out for all the marbles, for sure. That would be conflict. The tension is what could happen. And that usually takes place in the reader's mind or in the shadows of the story, if you like. So let's take a closer look at the differences between conflict and tension. So what do we have here? So conflict. Generally, at the beginning of the story, there's an initiating incident. Something happens, right? It's there's an explosion. Something blows up. Someone dies. Maybe your lead character gets fired, or their spouse leaves them. Something like that. These are all things that happen. This is what creates conflict. This is the crisis at the beginning of a story that will push our hero, push our lead character out of their comfortable little normal world and out into the great unknown world where they have to solve this major problem or come to terms with it. That's conflict. Tension occurs, let me go back up. Tension occurs when the hero isn't sure what to do or what's coming next, whether they're still in danger, whether there are boogeymen in the shadows, that sort of thing. So that so two things happen at the beginning of the story, right? There's the conflict, the crisis itself, that initiating incident, and that stuff happening. But then there's also the tension of what could happen again, or what could be coming again down the road. And so that's what creates that initial hook for a reader. Conflict and dialogue. I want to talk a little bit about this too, because as you know, as the story progresses, our main character is confronted with all kinds of obstacles to overcome in order to achieve their main goal. And so they'll often talk to a confidant, a helper, someone else to figure out what's happening and what they can do. So it's this dialogue part which is obviously important here. It's important here, but we don't want our hero to realize what they need to do right at the very beginning, of course. So we want them to not come up with the solution right away. We want them to try different things and fail, of course, and that creates more tension. Before they actually come up with the best solution. And as you know, the best solution will occur at the very end when everything else has been tried and has not worked. So now sometimes, and I often hear this in the novel workshops especially, does that mean that our main character always has to fail when they're trying to do stuff? And I suppose the answer to that is no, not necessarily. But if they solve one small problem, what it means is that you've got another problem that comes up, or maybe two problems that come up. For example, we stopped the leak in the boat, but now we're lost and blown off course and out of food. And so that leads to, of course, more tension, more conflict, and that pushes the plot along, that pushes the story along. So we want to make sure that whatever our hero tries to do, it's not going to work until the very end. All right, let's see what else we have here. Now, one of the benefits of writing a novel is that we actually have the time and space to develop characters and scenes and focus on things like conflict and tension and plotting and their twists and all of that sort of good stuff. So it means we don't have. Oh my goodness! It means we don't have to worry so much about jumping right into conflict all the time. That we can develop this tension. Now, there are different types of things we can consider. So, for example, as I mentioned before, we don't have to solve every problem right away. I mean, the main character, doesn't have to solve every problem right away. So, and then, of course, at the beginning of the story and right up until about the midpoint, things are happening to our lead. They're happening to the hero. Remember, when our hero first sets out on a quest or sets out to fix whatever needs fixing, what they're trying to do is recover their normal world. They're trying to get back to the way things were. But at some point, they realize that that's no longer possible and that old world has gone. And so there's a shift in thinking. There's a shift in attitude that our hero goes through about halfway through the story. And what that is for the first half of the story, they tend to be a victim. They tend to have stuff happen to them. Like, why is this happening to me? I just want to live a normal life, right? But then around the midpoint, there's a shift from the victim mode to a warrior mode. And at that point, we start to see our hero come alive, and they start making decisions and taking action and fighting for things and pushing. And yes, of course, they're trying to make things right, and they're trying to save whatever needs to be saved. And they just keep making matters worse by doing this. So, of course, this builds up more and more tension. The conflict that is shown with our hero trying to fix things, i.e. doing stuff, always results in more tension, more things that could go wrong, more things that do go wrong. And that they have to try to overcome. So how do we build tension in a story? Well, structurally, there are lots of things we can do. So, for example, if you take the short story or the novel workshop with me, you already know that the structure holds the tension together and the conflict as well. It's built that way. And that basically goes back to Aristotle's model of storytelling, with a beginning, middle, and an end, and the middle is twice as big as the beginning, and there's rising conflict, and then there's a major battle at the end, and a denouement, all that wonderful stuff. And we throw in plot twists along the way. So if we're following a structure like that, then the structure itself demands that the tension be there, and so we don't have to worry about constantly wondering if our tension is good enough. It's always going to keep building on itself. There's another kind of tension, and that's the emotional and psychological tension. And this was what Mike was saying in the advanced novel course the other day, is that there's sometimes there's episodes of unrequited love, or characters seem out of sync, or there are episodes from a character's past that keep holding them back or making them do things that they don't want to do. So this is the kind of emotional and psychological tension that builds. We also have a third type, which is the lead failing in overcoming obstacles, or succeeding, but then more problems arise, which I spoke about just a little bit earlier, so we don't have to go through that again. But we build this into our plotting tools. So when we're plotting, we're always thinking about what that character could do next. And of course, they're going to try all the easy things first, and those are going to fail. So then they have to find better and better ways of trying to address the issues that keep coming up. And as a result, the consequences of failing keep getting greater and greater. So this also builds tension into the story. And the fourth item here on how to build tension is looking at those sections, those paragraphs, those scenes where there is a lot of tension building. And what we want to do then as writers is to write in shorter sentences and use shorter words to try to really emphasize the tension in the story itself. So those are four things to be aware of that you can look at in your story. And of course, we never want to make it easy for the hero to succeed. If it's too easy, then the story is boring and predictable. So we don't want that. So what we want to make sure of is that everything is a struggle. Nothing comes easily for our hero. The consequences of failing are dire. And by focusing on those sorts of things, there will always be tension and there will always be conflict arising in the story. And that's what we want. That's what keeps a reader reading. That's what creates a page-turning story, right? Now, a couple other things to look out for, to be aware of. One is to keep information hidden from the main character and or from the reader. So if you as the reader, if you're going through the story and maybe there's a couple of sections where your opposition's viewpoint is shown, and the antagonist is planning to take over the world, and they're going to do this and they're going to do that. You as the reader understand that, but our hero doesn't understand that. And so they might be walking into a trap, right? So that builds tension for the reader because we know what's coming. We know that there's something evil behind that door. Likewise, your antagonist may not share all of their information with the reader. So that way it's a surprise not only for the lead character but also for the reader when it comes up too. And that's our lovely plot twist that comes along. And one of the key things about writing, of course, is to avoid telegraphing what comes next. Mystery writers are exceptionally good at creating the red herrings, the things, the little rabbit holes that lead nowhere, so that we, the reader, can never figure out who done it until the very end when our detective puts it all together. So we want to avoid telegraphing what happens next, and that's a skill that will come in time. And the more you write, the more you'll understand how to use it. But if you see something that's a little bit obvious, then you'll want to check that and do something about it. All right, so those are the main things to look out for then. I've got the pinwheel of death. Those are the main things to watch out for when you're looking at conflict versus tension. And between conflict and tension, I think tension is the more important one. Conflict, yes, you'll always have dragon slayers and monsters and things to overcome, but it's the tension of what could come next which keeps the reader reading. So I hope this is helpful, and best of luck with your reading. Or if you're not reading, then you're writing. We'll see you around.